Hi there, thanks for joining me for another live stream here looking at HSE Prosecutions. Hopefully you've been enjoying what we've done so far with these. I haven't been able to get one out over the last few days, but getting back on track here. So before we do start, please do let us know if you do find these in any way helpful. Do hit the like button for us, and of course make sure you're subscribed to our channel here on YouTube so that you can get notified when we release either this type of content or other content regards learning, health and safety, anything related to that. If you're interested in it, either for personal use or for business use, then we really value your support and would be thankful for that. So without further ado, let's take a look at this case. This one, as you can see up in the top corner, hopefully is related to a fine that was issued to a business after an HSE inspection. So slightly different, not someone directly or at least provably injured here. In this case, this one was more a case of the HSE had visited a premises on multiple occasions over the course of a number of years actually, and ultimately it ended with the business getting prosecuted with a fine of around £15,000 and plus costs, just because they hadn't put in relevant measures or appropriate measures for controlling wood dust in their wood workshop. This was a furniture company in this case, and I just wanted to use it as a means to talk about looking out for certain things within your business operations, whether that be chemicals, substances, in the form of the many different forms that they may come in. Sometimes these risks aren't always as obvious as this one might be. Let's look at one of the photos first of all from the case here. So what had happened was the HSE in this case, and I'll make that a little bit bigger for us. The HSE had visited on previous occasions and highlighted the fact that the extraction and the management of wood dust in this particular workshop hadn't been done well enough. If you may or may not already be aware that wood dust in itself, as the HSE have pointed out in this case, can cause respiratory issues such as asthma. It's also been linked to certain cancers like nasal cancer, and obviously workplace and occupational exposure to it, particularly over longer periods of time, is going to potentially put people at risk of those types of conditions. Therefore, it should be managed quite closely and needs to be managed better than what these guys were able to achieve here. You can see in this photo a lot of dust was able to be built up on the ground. It over, I suspect, a period of time. They did say that the business had been using brushes to remove the dust, so allowing that dust to kick up into the air. Obviously it would be able to be respired if that was the case, before falling and settling onto the ground and then being cleared away. The other side of it is if you're brushing it, and brushing it in large quantities as well was part of the issue here, as you can see, and you'll see in the next photo, which is quite bad. I'll just throw that one up here now. Just give me a second. You can see here, I'll just make it a little bit bigger for you. Well, it doesn't take a genius to work out that this is really quite an exceptional amount of buildup of wood dust. And as I was saying, when you then let it build up to that extent, if you're going through the cleaning process, even through the cleaning process itself, a lot of fine dust will be suspended into the air, and therefore whoever is conducting that cleaning operation or those in the vicinity are going to be exposed to that dust. So the HSE rightly pointed out that this sort of level of dust being generated should be taken away in the likes of an exhaust ventilation system or LEV system and such, like either on the tools or in a local area or very close to the vicinity of where the dust is being generated, so that it can be captured before being respired by anyone. In this case, it clearly wasn't happening. So a few things, as we normally do, I'll pick out a couple of points to think about. I'm sure you'll have your own things that you want to that will trigger in your own mind here. If you do have any thoughts on my points or additional points that you want to put in the comments, I would really love it if some of you would drop a comment in. Let me know your thoughts on it. Let's get some engagement here with these live videos, and we can have a discussion on it, and I will look at the comments afterwards and get back to you, particularly if you have any questions, of course, as well. But the point that I've taken off then, not to dwell too much on that, is number one, first and foremost, and it's a bit of an obvious one, if the regulator is visiting you, in this case when I say regulator, it was the health and safety executive, of course, you have to pay attention to what they're asking for. Clearly there had been multiple visits in this case to this business. They hadn't put into place the recommendations that the HSE had advised upon, and therefore an improvement notice ended up becoming a prohibition notice, which meant they had to stop work, and subsequently a prosecution. So on the HSE's side of things, it looks as if they've given the business a few chances. They haven't just come in all guns blazing, so to speak, and prosecuted them. And typically, in my experience, they don't do that, particularly if there hasn't been, an injury or severe accident or incident of any kind. They will give you a chance, and multiple chances even. In this case, that's been ignored. So my first point is, do take heed of those regulatory visits and what's being asked to be done by your regulator. Otherwise, you really are running the risk of ending up being prosecuted here, as we can see in this case. The second point here is just to really ask yourself, and possibly leading on from some other cost type reviews we've done here, is what type of substances are being generated in your workspaces? Do you know what they are? Have you really looked at all the different ways that substances and materials are manipulated and generated? And almost at times you will have byproducts from your processes, whether that be working with metals, woods, or even just general chemicals in the form of liquids and so on. It's worth asking the question, are there dusts being created? Are there, we've got sawdust here, which is being created, and the thing about that is that there are large particles being generated, but there's also very fine particles being generated as well, and the different sizes come with different issues in terms of potential to health and so forth. So if we're not talking about wood, but we're talking about other materials, like for example, if you're working with metal, if you're grinding or you're welding, there's different aspects that need to be considered there in terms of things like fumes being generated, metal dusts as well being generated, for example. So my point is, have a think about exactly what happens in your work environment, and make sure that you're covering all of the connotations or the types of material that are being generated, and how that material in particular is changing throughout the process, and whether there's any then exposure to the workforce or other people as a result of that. Okay, in this one it was pretty self-explanatory, but we see a lot of cases where there are very much materials that are being changed in a way that isn't so obvious to the layman, and it's not until you look into it in detail that you actually find all the different risks that do exist. And on that last point, then the third point that I want to make here is just to ensure that even when you're looking at your chemicals, for example, at a high level. So I'll give an example of paints, for example. So we've been doing some work with some clients recently on paint powders, so for powder coating of metal materials. And nowadays the paints that you're using are a lot less harmful on the surface, so to speak, or a lot less obviously harmful in terms of the isocyanates have been removed from a lot of them, a lot of the harmful materials that would have been there in the past. have been removed. So when you look at the safety data sheets, to a large extent, they look quite harmless. You might have perhaps harm to the environment, maybe as your only hazard that's been recognised. But my point here is you must always dig deeper, and also as well as that, so don't take the information you're getting just as sort of the only information that you can take from it, and be a bit more conservative if you can, because there are always new materials being used, new chemicals being introduced with a lot of these new products and these substitute products that we don't always know what the future or potential harm will be to people's health over the long term. So my point is here is that, for example, in the case of the paints, if someone's working in a spray booth, for example, and they're generating spray, obviously, whether that's automated or from a gun, although the safety data sheet might say actually the level of harm from this product is very low and nothing of significance, we have to make sure that we also take into account that we don't know what we don't know, if that makes sense. That old saying that we can't make assumptions, or we can't put control measures in for something that we don't know exists. But if we are using synthetic chemicals, and they are still chemicals in the form of mists and dusts, then if we just use a bit of common sense, regardless of what that is, it's probably likely that it's not going to be good for you if you're respiring or breathing that in particularly for a long period of time. Even if the safety data sheet isn't flagging anything, what I would say is, if it's easy for you to be conservative, such as getting the operators to wear respirators or breathing apparatus, or enclosing your process just so that material isn't being respired, then absolutely do that as a preventative measure, because in 5 or 10 years time we might find out that these paints, and I'm not picking out any in particular, but whatever the chemicals are, you might find that actually some of the products in them are harmful as opposed to what you were told 5 or 10 years ago, and at that point it'll be too late to take those countermeasures. I'm not saying go nuts and start doing things unnecessarily, but as I say, using your experience and applying a bit of common sense, and sometimes it's often useful just to apply that extra level of control where it's easy enough to do so, just as a bit of a reassurance there to protect your workers. Okay, so that's the 3 points on this one. Hopefully that one was helpful for you. Again, nothing too technical to go into there, but just again, watch out for, if you're having regulator visits and you're being advised to do certain things, do take that seriously, and just make sure to engage with the HSE or whoever it is fully, and ensure that you understand what they're asking for and so forth. So that's it for this one. I'll just remind you again that we are giving away 1 million free courses over at safety.com. If you haven't taken advantage of those yet, we'll leave links again down at the bottom of this video, as we normally do. And I'd like to thank anyone who has been over there for their support so far. We're heading towards 30,000 courses that we've delivered so far, and we're really looking to ramp that up in 2024. So thanks for your help. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you again in the next one. Thank you.